Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Henry Stewart Events, welcome to our Online Ed virtual conference. We have a packed agenda for you today, so without further ado, please welcome our chair, Dr. Shannon Jones. Shannon, over to you.
Thank you, Imra, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are today. As Imra said, I am Shannon Jones, and I am so excited to welcome you to Online Ed 2023. Thank you to all the attendees from across the globe for joining to review and discuss the newest developments and latest thinking in delivering learning online. We also thank our sponsors for supporting this event. So make sure you visit them throughout the conference via the exhibition tab to find out more. During the sessions today, we encourage you to chat with fellow attendees and of course, make the most out of our expert speaker lineup by submitting your questions using the Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You can also use the chat tab to get the conversation going and navigate to the lounge tab, where you can participate in real-time networking with industry peers. If at any point during the event today you need assistance from the Henry Stewart team, please use the chat bot on the bottom right of your screen. And now we're going to get on with our show. I'm delighted to introduce our first speakers from Newcastle Business School. We have today's senior lecturers, Dr. Amy Stabler and Dr. Nicola Patterson, who will be discussing putting the work-based learner in their context right at the heart of blended learning in executive education. And so I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Shannon. And Amy's just going to share our presentation slides. And I would like to say, well, welcome to our presentation, which we're talking about putting the work-based learner and their context at the heart of blended learning on a particular program, the MSc in Strategic Leadership in Newcastle University Business School in the UK. As I've said, my name is Nicola Patterson, and I'm co-presenting today with my colleague, Dr. Amy Stabler. And together we design and deliver a number of modules across this particular program together. And we're going to share and talk a little bit more about our practices in relation to putting the work-based learner at the heart of blended learning. So before we do, we're just going to talk about one particular program, the MSc, that Amy and I deliver, but it also incorporates the Level 7 Senior Leader Apprenticeship Program, which for those who may not be familiar, as this is, I believe, is particular to the UK context, this is a professional qualification for work-based learners, which is usually sponsored through their employers. So in the presentation, we are going to showcase a variety of experiential learning and teaching methods that support post-experience work-based learners on this MSc in Strategic Leadership and the Level 7 Senior Leader Apprenticeship. And we're illustrating this through one particular module, Leadership Perspectives module. This is a 20 credit module from a UK perspective that is associated with 200 hours of learning for a 20 credit module in higher education in the UK. And what we aim to do in this presentation is to explore how these practices could be applied within your learning and teaching context, and to challenge your thinking and previous practice through the process of social learning, to appraise and make connections to support you to apply these methods in your own learning and teaching practice. So to provide a context to the programs and this particular module, the learner in their context, they are part-time learners, as I said in my previous slide. They're post-experience and work-based learners. So most of the learners are working part-time, full-time. That is their primary role in across sector in various organisations of size and sector. And in terms of this particular module, Leadership Perspectives, this is situated in a program context, and that's really important as we develop and discuss through the presentation, because this is not a modular environment. The program narrative for the MSc and the apprenticeship is really important in terms of the learner's journey and making sure that this learning is integrated at a program level within and across modules. And how that manifests is through blended learning. To accommodate a work-based learner, we have a number of in-person sessions that take place on campus. For this particular module, we have a monthly half-day session on 4 occasions during 1 semester, and this is complemented in a blended delivery. So we release content weekly through our virtual learning environment, Canvas. Each week we release a topic and we take the learner through that topic through different activities each week. We see our roles as facilitators of learning with a particular focus at a program level on critical management education. And we also have a central, what I would say, a golden thread through this program perspective of social learning to really hold the learner in their workplace context in relation to one another on the program throughout this learning process. In terms of the pedagogical strategy, we talk about 3 different elements with our learners, and we discuss within our program team 3 key components. And it's the simultaneous enactment of context, content, and process. And this is what holds our program and moves down with to the module level. And the first, in terms of thinking about context, there's an underlying assumption that all of the learners that come onto this program, and indeed in this particular module, are immersed in a complex professional workplace context. So we want learners to build on their participants' contexts. We want them to share their own experiences and build on the experiences of others. We want them to be able to contextualize their learning through exploring, challenging, and applying their real world practices. So we want to bring everything that they have, all of their experiences with them to this each learning setting. And if they bring the context, what we do is we bring the content. So through the academic content of providing critical analytical frameworks, concepts, theories, and models and tools for decision making and leadership, we help learners to develop the mastery of their knowledge, skills, and behaviours in strategic leadership, with the aim of developing sustainable, leaderful practice for evolving cultures in organisations. So with that simultaneous enactment of context with the content, what we also do is we hold learners in a process, a learning process where we create a psychologically safe developmental cohort. And we do that by providing psychological safety principles and boundaries that we contract with the learners and help to develop that through time through the program, so that we can create social learning spaces and activities, including action learning, to help learners to really make sense of their experiences through reflection and reflexivity, individually and with one another and with us. So in terms of what this looks like in relation to a weekly flow of learning, moving from that pedagogical strategy to a bit more of a micro level, operational level, we have a number of different components, the first of which is reflect. So for us, reflecting in terms of the individual learner reflecting on themselves, how they relate to others and with others in relation to their practice, and how they become an active participant in a reflective learning community, remembering and beginning that journey with social learning at the heart of this program. Then we move to the explore component. And with explore, we provide learners with an understanding of a particular discipline area, theories, topics, and we get them to explore these theories in relation to their practice and the practice of their organisation, so that they can explore and think about possibilities to develop them personally and from an organisational perspective. Then we take them through to the next stage, which is the challenge phase. And that's where we get learners to challenge their own personal attitudes, thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, perhaps question and challenge the practices through theory of themselves and that of their organization, so that they're able to integrate the knowledge, skills, behaviors, and practices to tackle grand societal problems and relate these to sustainable wicked issues and problems that themselves and organizations are dealing with. Once they've moved and progressed from the challenge phase, we go to apply. So this is all about taking it back into the workplace, back into their practice. And we ask learners to apply what they've learned and developed to a work-based context through activities and assessments that we curate for them. So we get them to develop and apply practice-based research approaches and help them to develop and apply mastery in their practice, so that ultimately they can engage in a social learning space to co-create knowledge-based experiences and develop new meaning and experiences within this new learning community. And just to give you on this slide a bit of an example, on this slide we have an example from the module that I mentioned earlier, leadership perspectives. And this is one particular week, week 7, which is focused on popularized leadership. And as you can see, we have each week we release material. We do this purposefully, that we release material on a weekly basis. This is based on our knowledge and experience of working with work-based learners. Time-sensitive and weekly timed released activities are really important for learners to sustain that engagement. We don't want to put learners off by just giving them the entire content at the beginning. We want to gently and in a time-sensitive way curate that learning journey for them in a way that's appropriate for them. So what we do in each week, we have about 10 pages of learning activities in each week and topic. And as you can see, they're organized by the type of learning activity. We start with the first page of the learning objectives of that week, and then we take them through guided online learning. So these are activities which they can do within their own time, that's flexible for them to dip in and out of. And then we have in this particular week a scheduled on campus session. So that's organized, and we also have the work-based activities there. And as you can see, within that week, we use the explore, challenge, and apply framework to really take learners through that process. We also, within each of those pages, highlight to learners where the reflect and the co-creation and social learning takes place. And we can give you an example of that as we move through. But within the guided learning pages, we offer a combination of mini videos, lectures, delivered by us as the teaching team. We provide academic articles, professional articles, videos of experts, and we encourage and curate those activities for learners to think about how this relates to themselves, others, and be critically reflexive. In weeks where we don't have a scheduled on-campus session, we often create social learning opportunities through discussion boards or other technology tools that we can integrate within the virtual learning environment. So there's that interaction within every week. On the slide here, the importance of self and critical reflexivity is really important. So in terms of how we foreground that within the Canvas space, I've provided an exemplar from the guided learning explore activity on the screen. And what we do in this particular activity is that we always invite learners to critically reflect on whether they agree with the material and the content that we're giving them. Even in the explore pages, we're giving them and inviting them to digest content, but we always ask them to think about whether they agree with the views of others. So we're not expecting them to swallow this whole in terms of new concepts without question. And we encourage learners to think about this in relation to how this learning applies to them in their individual practice, and also within their organisational practice. And you can see at the bottom of the page there, we encourage through the prompt of a learning diary which denotes them, to encourage them to reflect upon what they've understood from this particular content piece. And then we often in the guided learning sessions take it deeper. And what I mean by that, in this particular exercise, you can see how we continue to take the work of Ibarra that was on the previous slide, and we take the central tenets from Ibarra's developing a playful attitude, and we take them and begin to link to another module. So we start to get learners to think about their learning at a program level. So as I said at the beginning of the session, thinking about the learning within and across modules, so that we can integrate this learning at a program level, so that they can apply what they're doing at from a leadership practice and a leadership development perspective. Thanks. I'm going to hand over to Amy now.
Thanks, Nicola. So in the previous screen and this one, you may have noticed that we talk directly to the learner. We're using the pronoun you, and we're really engaging with the learners in their own world as we build towards whatever the social learning activity is for the week. And in this particular week, it's an on-campus session of 3 hours. And I just wanted to highlight how we think about reflexivity as opposed to reflection on practice. We're very much influenced by the work of Anne Cunliffe, who writes about reflexivity as questioning our own position, our positionality, and what we and others may be taking for granted, what we are seeing, saying and doing, and not seeing, saying and doing in our practice and our relations with each other. So this is what we do in the online space, is really create a lot of learning activities that invite our learners to go very deeply into their own personal experience and critically reflect on it, and then into the social learning space. And I'll show you in the next screen some examples from what happens on campus. So this is where the social learning environment really comes to life, and this could equally happen as it did when we were working fully online during COVID-19 pandemic. This could also happen within a synchronous online space. Essentially, what we do is we don't lecture, we don't provide any knowledge inputs when we're on campus. What we choose to do is to facilitate interactive activities, so that the learners can learn from each other and put into practice what they've been absorbing online during the previous week. So you'll see that this on-campus session summary covers one of the activities during this 3-hour session on the right-hand side of the screen. And this is where we're picking up from that video work with Professor Ibarra about challenging the concept of authentic leadership and asking them in pairs to work together about how they're thinking about their leadership identity. And at this point, we're also linking back through into what happened on week 6 in this module, and inviting them to use some coaching questions, which we taught to them in the previous week. So it's bringing together weeks 6 and 7 into an activity that's happening in the social learning space, that's focused around their own sense making of the material that we've shared previously. The pairs and threes work is something that we allow them to do privately. We don't pry as educators. We don't come and sit with them or get too close to listening to what they're doing. And the same thing would happen if we were doing it online. We'd put them into breakout rooms. We wouldn't drop in with them. And that's because this is a high risk activity for them. We're very mindful that we are disrupting their normative patterns of thinking and thinking about themselves in the workplace, and we're sensitive to the risk of shaming or exposing our learners or judging them in any way. So the emphasis is on play, experimentation, exploring these concepts together, and sharing experiences so that they can see the things that they haven't seen before about what's going on for them. And another way that we bring this together in the classroom is using Mentimeter, which you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, which is some of you may have used before, or a similar tool, which is an online interactive tool that allows your learners to vote on particular questions or post opinions anonymously, interacting with the app. And this allows us to take a snapshot of where people get to at the end of the exercise. It creates a collective sense making and collective memory of the process between the learners. And it's something that we then post online afterwards for them, again, to act as an artifact of their on-campus time, or their together time, again, if you were doing it online, in order to really remember and cement that learning about where they got to. So it's a way of making public what was private in those previous previous pairs activity. What we do after the on-campus session and the in-person session is we develop this again as a response to learners within the COVID-19 pandemic and working fully online, is when learners couldn't make the session for one reason or another, we started to record a very short video summary after the in-person session. And that video summary is not a fact-based, content-based video summary of what we've done in the session. In fact, we don't actually necessarily name exactly what happened in the session. It's actually the learning team, we team teach, there'll be two of us recording conversation for about 10 minutes of our reflections on what the learning was that we all experienced together in the room in that session, highlighting key moments, key insights, key points of reflexivity that occurred during that time. And the feedback that we've had from learners is that this isn't just useful for people who missed the session, but it's really useful for maybe recapping or reflecting on the learning, but they also see the teaching team as learning with them, and we're demonstrating reflexivity, which is something we're encouraging them to participate in. We also, just to pick up that final aspect from our learning model, we go back into apply after that co-creation of the on-campus session. We move into an apply opportunity back on the virtual learning environment. Here again, you can see we're encouraging them to continue to take that playfulness into their practice and change the way that they are working. So this is where they're really making the change in terms of how they're operating day to day back at work. We might also, in this phase, share a video of a practitioner talking about how they've also put into practice the work that we've been sharing with them. So we're giving them lots of different learning styles, opportunities to engage with the material, to put it into practice throughout this 1 week of learning. So I hope you found that interesting and enlightening and something to take away from our presentation today. If you're interested in reading more from us and our colleagues about this approach, we've recently published a paper online available through Management Learning. So there's a call out for us, and you can also find us on LinkedIn. We're always interested to link in with people passionate about the same topics as we are. And with that, I will hand back to Shannon and stop sharing my screen.
Thank you so much. Please join me in giving them a round of applause for an amazing presentation. So thank you all so much for sharing and enlightening us on your work and your project. I'm going to open the floor to questions from anyone in the audience. There was a question, but I believe you all answered it in the process of your presentation, but that just in case people missed it, it was wait, let me get back to it. They wanted to, Mary G wanted to know, was this entirely asynchronous? And so I'm asking it just in case other people missed that question, and so I'll give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, I'll go first, and Amy will can add to it. Yes, absolutely. It was a combination of asynchronous and synchronous activities. We launched this particular program in September 2020. So what we designed and developed and planned for was very different to the reality for I'm sure we can all relate to, in September 2020. So even though we were completely online in September 2020, we did deliver online synchronous activities. So we've always had a blend of synchronous with online and synchronous in person. We've, as a result of that first year of delivery, what the delivery model and pattern that we intended before COVID-19 has, we've learned a lot from that delivery from September 2020, and we've adapted what we do. So what's important for us is, because it's blended, we always anchor the learner in the online space first, because that's where, as Amy mentioned, all of the knowledge and content of the program is based, and we want them to be able to be technically okay with that and know that that is the space where they go to first. The synchronous activity and the collaborative asynchronous activity is where we really develop the social learning aspect. And in terms of, from a program perspective, how we deliver the synchronous activity in person, we tend to do at a program level 1 day on campus each month. And in the weeks where we aren't doing anything in person on campus, we do some asynchronous social collaborative online activities. Amy, do you want to add to that?
No, I was just saying, I just suppose I wanted to clarify that all of the pages that you saw are asynchronous online. So it's only that 3-hour session that we do per module per month. So we do 2 modules in our day, our synchronous day, whether that's online or in person. So the large proportion of what they're doing is asynchronous, actually.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for your response. And now we have another question from Gwen Garrison, and it says, you create a lot of wonderful activities to engage. How to promote the engagement? How do you promote the engagement itself? And do you require participation to track their engagement?
That's a great question, and something we're always learning as well. I think before we begin, what's a real positive and goes in our favor is the type of learner that we have, because work-based learners that come to us already typically have a lot going on in their lives, as we have all probably experienced ourselves when as part of lifelong learning. So that most of the learners that arrive with us from day one really want to do and are engaged with the program of learning. So we begin well, is what I would say. In terms of maintaining that engagement, it's about us being, as a program team, and I mean that as a program, not just individual modules, that we as a team are as engaged in the conversations, particularly online, as they are. So it's really important that we start off well and we make this a personal experience. We acknowledge and appreciate contributions, we build on them, and we demonstrate where we're learning too. And I think that's really important for us, particularly from the business school perspective, even though most of the program team have practitioner and professional experience before they come to academia. That only has currency for so long. Actually, it's our learners that continue to make our experiences current. So we appreciate and acknowledge that. We also integrate elements of it into the assessment. So I'm going to be honest there. We have that assessment hook too. So that does help as well. Amy, do you want to make any other comment on to that?
I think that's just a great question. I mean, we do track. We don't track officially, and but we check. We'll have a look on the VLE to see whether people are engaging or not. If we've got a feel they're not engaging, and we might catch them in an on-campus session and check with them. But they actually can't do any of the really fun on-campus activities without doing the online work. So that also encourages them to do it, because they get they just don't really enjoy it if they haven't done something in those previous weeks.
Well, thank you again for your responses. We're going to go on to the next question, and it is from Allison Carroll. And is, are there any elements of your course delivery online that you have not continued with post-COVID, and why?
think we actually got more ideas from online because of COVID. So the opposite happened. So we
had too much to do.
Yeah. So we ended up, as a result of COVID, we actually blended more to online. So we do less in person as a result of COVID than we would have done had COVID not happened. And the example that Amy really illustrated was the video summaries being case in point, that actually they were something that we did in response to COVID, and they ended up being, it was an innovation in terms of a learning consolidation tool that we would never have done had it not have been for COVID-19. So I actually think being fully online enhanced and really challenged us to make us think about what we were capable of, because we all were able, technologically enabled very rapidly at that point. So I think it's been a real positive. I think we've done more. I think we've been braver with some of the additional collaborative tools that we had to do as we were thinking about, well, how can we want to make this a really social learning experience. Everybody's in a little Zoom box. How do we bring people out of their Zoom box in a way that's comfortable and works for them and appreciates and acknowledges everything that might be going on for them personally and professionally? So for me, it was a professional challenge, but actually one that I think the programme has benefited from enormously. Amy?
No, I can't. I've been desperately thinking, Nicola, is there anything we dropped after that? But all we seem to do is gain more work. We did, it's hard work. I'll just be really own that. This pedagogy is hard work, but it's really enjoyable because I think it just does engage people more.
It does. And I think sharing that actually is in the paper that we talk about, we do feel like we are flipping the normative, and even the language that we use about most of the things that we do in this programme, everything seems to be the drop-down box of non-standard. That seems to be something that's common to the way that to what we do and the way that we do things with this programme.
And we have two more questions. The next question comes from Tara Mathian. It says, how do you set up expectations for students to challenge the content? Do students have guidelines or prompts to get them thinking about how to present their ideas?
Yeah, I'll start, and Amy, you can come in. I think
great question.
Great questions. I think the beginning, the programme level induction, which we do on campus in person, sets that up in terms of, we really spend a lot of time. Actually, we spend 2 days with them in year one with induction to really get them to know each other and understand who they are and where they come from, in terms of developing that initial identity development, so that they have a level of comfort with one another, so we can start to develop psychological safety. And for me, I think that is the key. Amy, you talk about it all the time about, frightened learners can't learn. So that's really important that we encourage them to feel safe in the space, whether that's in person on campus or whether that's in an online space, to share a bit of who they are as a professional and personally, because certainly in the initial modules that undoubtedly overlaps and we need to bring that into view. So I think that's probably the starting point, and we do guide them through academic personal tutoring to develop their skills, to develop that framing. But I think we guide them through the learning online itself in terms of breadcrumbing questions in a way that they can build that critical lens for themselves.
I'm also thinking that the way that we use the discussion boards is we build up from quite an easy start. So we just ask them to bring their context. What kind of a leader do you think you are? We just ask them to throw around some ideas on the discussion board, and we're very kind of appreciative of that as they start to sort of venture and put themselves out there, particularly in that asynchronous way. You can see much more when you're with people, how they're responding to things you're putting out there, whereas we really encourage them to respond to each other. We give them instructions. We give them an instructional video about how to use a discussion board in an appropriate and courteous way and build on other people's posts. So we do give them a lot of guidance very early on, and we kind of train them a bit. If they're going off a bit wonky on a discussion board, we'll curate that and sort of respond politely about how they're doing that, and point to things that are working really well. Again, it's all about not shaming them and encouraging their participation.
Thank you. And the next question, and we have two more questions, so hopefully we can get to both of these before our session ends. So the first one is, how did you develop authentic activities to align with workplace-based professional units?
So is that in terms of authentic leadership, the topic, is that?
Hard to tell from the question.
Yeah. I think it's Rivak. If you could put in the chat box if to clarify your question, and we can go on to the next question while we wait for that clarification. The next one was, I was wondering if you could expand on the video summaries, who is recording them and whose reflections are captured?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, of course. The video summaries are from the academic team who have delivered, or well, facilitated that session that particular day, and it's just a way of it's a bit of I feel like reducing the power dynamic in the room. Of course, we're the academics, we're the ones who are bringing the content, and we're holding them in a process. But in particular sessions, I've found where you're not together in person for very long, that valuing the cohort voice and the individual learner's voice in that time and space is really important. So there have been occasions, for example, where myself and Amy thought, oh, that's a really interesting point. Rather than taking up the space in the short amount of time, give the voice and the time to the group, and we can share some of the anecdotes or exemplars that we thought of that could add value to that and share them in the summary. Or it might be that we genuinely don't think of something until afterwards, a bit like coming out of an interview saying, I wish I said that. It gives us an opportunity to do that as well.
Yeah, and it's very simple the way that we practically do the summaries. We just record it on Zoom or on Teams. We use both those facilities to record us talking. So we'll either talk live in person, we'll sit in front of the screen and just record it 10 minutes and then post it, or we'll record it maybe the next day if we're really tired at the end of the session, on virtually with each other, and we post it. So it's quite an informal, it's not a produced video summary, it's literally a summary as if we're having a chat about the session afterwards, thinking about what was interesting and sharing our insights, as Nicola says, and extending some of the things we perhaps didn't have time or thought about afterwards. Sorry, Nicola, I interrupted you. What were you?
No.
Where are you going with that?
I was just going to say, actually, recently a learner's commented on, because we don't rehearse it. It is not scripted. It's very natural, a bit like Amy and I are talking now. And learners said, oh, I love to just kind of for 10, 15 minutes to just listen to you and Amy and the natural conversation as you reflect on the session, because it helps them feel like they're getting to know us better as well and have that connection with us. Because if you think that in one semester they only see us on 4 occasions for a short period of time, it really helps that the development with the connection with the academic team too.
And we're perhaps speaking to the previous question, we're quite real about that. So if there was something that went wrong in the classroom, we'll comment on it, or just be as human as we can be in that interaction.
So I think we are just about out of time. So again, thank you all so much for an informative session. There are a couple questions in the Q&A that we did not get to. So if you all were interested in typing the responses to those, you could go in and do that for Barima and Rivak, who clarified that he was talking about, yes, authentic leadership activities. For everyone else in the session, again, thank you all for coming, and thank you for being so engaged with our presenters today. We invite you to join us over at 11:45 at the next session. And next, we're going to hear from colleagues from Queen Mary University of London and the University of California, Santa Cruz on virtual learning exchange partnerships. So again, thank you all. Thank you to our presenters, and thank you all for being here today. And we will see you all at the very next session. Thank you.